on, you said that Richmond couldn't engage in land acknowledgements because of the cases, the claims involved. So how come citizens didn't find out then about their property's title being at risk if you were aware?
Well, the reason that we don't do a land acknowledgement is mostly because of the lawsuit by the Musqueam over the land, the Garden City lands. That's the biggest factor. This case was a factor as well. But just remember that at the beginning, before the trial, the court was asked to make an order saying that all the landowners in the area had to be notified, and they said no. And then application was made at a later stage, the very same, asking that all the landowners be notified, and the answer was again no. So that's why all these people woke up one day and found that their property was subject to the Aboriginal title. They don't know what it is, they don't know what it means, what the implications are, they didn't know how it got there, and they don't know where it's going from here. So it's really a disaster.
You know, a lot of public meetings used to start with the singing of the anthem. Some would start with the Lord's Prayer. These were things that united us all and had a reference to our history, where we came from. These days, those are typically banned or at least replaced by ever more progressive sounding land acknowledgements. At my own kids' school, there was a land acknowledgement that went so deep and heavy, it felt like a prayer in itself. It felt semi-religious. I was the only person, by the way, in the entire auditorium who did not stand for this quasi-religious ceremony. And the reason for that is because I don't think it's honest. If you really think you are standing on stolen land, then shouldn't you do something about it? Shouldn't you give it up? Shouldn't you return it? It's a bit much to say, I've stolen this land, I acknowledge that, now let me keep on going. Now, I don't believe that the land is stolen. I think that the vast majority of land in Canada was properly ceded, and I hate to use the word, but through conquest. It's a terrible sounding word when we're talking about our First Nations brothers and sisters, but that is historically what happened. In many of the treaties, the very first words are, you know, that the First Nation representatives surrendered the land. I don't mean to be rough in my language, but if you actually read any of the treaties, they're fairly blunt in their description of what happened. There are some places in Canada where treaties did not happen. And so a question arises. If you built a house in Canada somewhere and you thought you owned your house, and the bank thought you owned your house because they gave you a mortgage that was secured against your house, and if for your entire life and for your entire memory of our history, you own that land, but then suddenly activist judges said, well, hang on a second, an amorphous claim might be made to your land that no, it's not yours. There's a pre-existing Aboriginal title that someone else, some Indian band, some Aboriginal activist may actually own your land, if not outright, at least some of it. What would that make you say or do? Suddenly, it's not just about being politically correct, like putting your pronouns in your email signature. Now, it's actually put up or shut up time. Well, that's what's happening in British Columbia when a court case suggested that Indigenous title or Aboriginal title could, in fact, impose itself on millions of people who think that they own their property. This is a shocking thing, and it led to a very rambunctious town hall meeting 2 nights ago in Richmond, a suburb of Vancouver. Joining us now to talk about this is our BC Bureau Chief, Drea Humphrey, who was there in Richmond at the meeting. Drea, great to see you again. Thanks for being there.
Good to see you. Thanks for having me.
Did I properly describe what's going on? Help me out, because I acknowledge I didn't read the full court ruling myself, but it seems serious enough that mayors of BC cities are writing to their landowners saying, hey, heads up, this just in, you might not own your land. Like they really are sending out those letters en masse, aren't they?
Well, it's an 800-page decision, so don't feel bad about not getting through it yet. And it was handed down in August. That is the Cowichan Tribe versus Canada AG case. And for the first time in Canada's history, we saw Aboriginal title be granted over private fee simple property lands. So that's never happened in Canada before. There have been other Aboriginal title claims before. So this is very unprecedented. And so the shocking part, in addition to that, is that the private landowners who are affected, it's not millions of people in Richmond. I would say probably hundreds of landowners because it's a certain strip at this moment.
Okay, thank you.
No worries. They were not told anything about this case. It was filed originally back in 2013, and then of course it was argued over the last 5 years or so. And they didn't get a knock on the door, they didn't get a letter, they didn't get a phone call until Aboriginal title was already deemed over their land, and their own title was deemed defective and invalid by the BC Supreme Court.
Oh my goodness. So first of all, thank you for the correction that this doesn't apply everywhere. It's just on certain parcels of land that I guess did not have a treaty. And the bulk of those are in British Columbia, in Ontario and Eastern Canada, and even in Alberta. I think all the land was covered by treaties. So just to be clear, is the property in question the places where there is no treaty? Is that why you say it's hundreds as opposed to millions?
It's just a certain section. So far, Aboriginal title has been given over approximately 7.5 kilometers of land. Now, here's the thing. The case is in appeal by all parties, which again are not the property owners. Right. And that includes being appealed by the Cowichan tribes, which is saying, we should have more, much more than what you've given us because we picked blueberries and we fished back there according to oral stories. So everybody is concerned about what this actually means. And may I remind you, in 2023, we saw something similar happen in Haida Gwaii, where David Eby didn't even wait for the courts. He just made a deal with the Haida Gwaii Nation and gave them Aboriginal title. And the promise was there was, don't worry, it's not going to affect private owned lands. But the fact of the matter is, even though that was not over private property title, it means that people who live there are now ruled under a government that they can't elect close to half of that, those islands' population. Wow.
The fact that people who weren't in that small lawsuit were not advised of it. I was reading that one of the reasons is that the courts didn't want all these interveners. The courts didn't want all these severely normal British Columbians to say, hey, you're talking about my house. I have an interest here. Can I be an intervener? I got something to say, Judge. And it sounds to me like the judges purposefully did not ring the alarm. And like you say, the decision went ahead, and the people who were affected by it weren't even given notice. Am I accurately reflecting what happened?
Absolutely. Both the province as well as the city of Richmond said, hey, we should probably tell these homeowners, and the Justice Young ruled, no, we're not going to do that. Or normally it would be Cowichan Tribe's responsibility, and she ruled that they do not have to notify. But here's the thing, the citizens understandably are not happy with the fact that the city didn't let them know anyways. It wasn't unlawful for them to send a letter and let them know so that they could start advocating on their behalf.
Wow. Now, I understand that first of all, tell me a little bit about the town hall meeting a couple of nights ago, because I saw your Twitter feed. It looked huge. And Richmond is a very diverse place, ethnically speaking, large Chinese community, large South Asian community. What's interesting about that is that these folks, there's been a large multicultural community in Vancouver for, I'd say, 50 years, certainly since the 1980s. This pits newcomers who thought they were coming to, I saw one speaker say, reminds me of Hong Kong, where the communist government says you don't really have title to your land. And all these folks who believed in the Canadian dream, the Canadian system, poured their life savings, bought a house, now they're terrified. It's just very strange to see. Tell me a little bit about what the meeting was like. Who was there? What were the sentiments? Who was there on behalf of the government? What kind of questions were? But give us a little bit of background, and then maybe we'll show some clips.
Well, first, we'll start with the fact that the meeting had to be relocated. It was originally planned for Richmond City Hall, but because so many people wanted to attend, they had to move it to the Vancouver Sheraton Hotel, which is located inside of Richmond. And so that alone was probably different for them. And there was hundreds who showed up. At one point, there were many people standing as there were no seats available. And it began with Mayor Malcolm Brody, addressing them and saying, here's what's happened. We have a lawyer here today. We'll also have the Attorney General, Nikki Sharma, speaking today as well. And so everybody sort of waited and heard the spiel from the lawyer. What stood out to me about what the lawyer said is because, of course, everybody there is going, what does this mean to us? Not even just the owners, but tenants too.
Right.
Also businesses. There's a couple of golf courses that are being claimed as well. And so one of the things that stood out to me, and I had actually spoken and interviewed a realtor, Matt Brevner, our Rebel News alumni before, and he had raised this as well, was that because it has been ruled that the Aboriginal title is outside of BC's Land Title Act, which was supposed to be our most secure property rights, that means the provisions that are inside of that to normally protect you from having your land taken, perhaps there's a scam somehow, which apparently can happen to take your title. Those are, not within that ruling. The title goes over, and that's called your indefeasibility protections. So that is raising a huge unknown. The lawyer confirmed that and said, you know what, you don't have those protections. The other thing the lawyer raised, and, it was interesting because I had already caught Nikki Sharma, our Attorney General with the NDP, on her way in and asked her, why on earth is it that your government has blocked government lawyers from arguing for extinguishment of Aboriginal title? They were actually blocked by the NDP from bringing up that argument. I had asked her about that. Then when we got into the meeting, Richmond's lawyer brought that up several times. He was really calling on the public to demand from the NDP government that they remove whatever barrier they've put on as the Attorney General and allow the province to go ahead and pursue that argument in the appeal, which apparently they suspiciously, in my opinion, did not do during the case, but the city of Richmond, of course, wanted to.
Ms. Sharma, the BC Conservatives say that the NDP was involved in making our government lawyers unable to argue against Aboriginal title extinguishment. What is your response to that claim?
Yeah, it's simply wrong, and I would ask the Conservative leader what his position was in 2014 when he was in government and received the first claim that was filed in this matter, and what his arguments were when he was in government.
Ms. Sharma, in 2021, Mayor Brody said that they were unable to engage as a city in land acknowledgements because of the legal implications that the Musqueam ban is claiming. What is your response? Are there any legal implications to land acknowledgements that say that we are on unceded territory?
I think I want to say very clearly that the work of reconciliation is very important. We work with First Nations across this province, and we work with cities, and we work with people across this province to lift all boats, to come up with resolutions to sort through past wrongs and move forward in a way that respects all people. And I think that's an important way to look at this.
What about the Indigenous people who think land acknowledgements are empty? Like, people don't actually want to give up the land when they say that.
I think this is a question that is a little bit not related to the issue that we're speaking today, but I will say that it's our position as a government that reconciliation is an important part of the work of the province, and I think all British Columbians expect us to sit down at a table together and try to resolve issues that are important to them.
Well, boy, she doesn't want to answer any questions at all. Look, either it's merely symbolic and it's like being polite and being, sensitive. And we could all be polite. We could all be sensitive, and maybe that makes for a happier and harmonious world. And British Columbia is a very diverse place, especially the greater Vancouver area. Yeah, I get it. But all of a sudden, a judge is saying, no, it's not just about symbolism. It's not just about a nicety. It means something real. And it means you may not actually own your house, your business, your golf course. So I think Nikki Sharma is trying to have it both ways. I mean, when she says reconciliation, what is it? To reconcile. Everyone loves to reconcile with someone with whom they've fallen out. There's nothing sweeter than making up with an old friend that you split from. I get it. But that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about billions of dollars worth of property being given to people who suddenly have been given the rights to it.
Absolutely. My first report against land acknowledgement was years ago here on Rebel News. But what I said there at the beginning of that question is very important. The mayor of Richmond in 2021, after the false claims of discovering bodies at residential schools spread the country, he was being pressured for his city to engage in land acknowledgements. And he responded to that pressure by saying the city could not because, we now know, he said because of legal cases that the city was wrapped up in. Now, I've also since learned that Port Coquitlam also does not do land acknowledgements for the exact same reason. They are also in the courts over Aboriginal title. So there is a very real legal implication to doing these land acknowledgement mantras where your elected officials are claiming on behalf that you live on unceded and stolen territory, especially now when we know that you don't even find out if your property, your land is at stake. So the other thing I would add to that is, of all people, First Nation band governments should know that reconciliation doesn't come from taking land.
Right.
No, that causes resentment today.
Wow, isn't that the truth? And I see that based on this breakthrough in British Columbia, there are now people talking about a similar litigation in Quebec. And I tell you, when you start giving property rights and other rights based on race and things like that, and you remove certainty, we are in for all sorts of trouble, economic trouble, because who would invest in land that they don't own? And I believe you're going to have cultural trouble. And frankly, I think this will build resentment towards Indigenous people. It will not reconcile. It'll make people more hostile. I think this is a terrible path. Now, this is the kind of thing that Rebel News reports on, and I'm really glad you were right in there in that press conference, and it makes me feel great to see Rebel News and our microphone, and you were asking the best questions, so thank you. So we're reporting the facts, we're giving our opinions, but this feels like the kind of thing where Rebel News, every once in a while, we don't just tell the story, we stop and get involved. Tell me what's on your mind about maybe a petition, or maybe even, I don't know if it's possible, participating in some way to give British Columbians some access to the courts, because it sounds like they've been kept out of the courts deliberately.
Well, absolutely. I am, watching this very closely. I found out in August, like most people did, and I've been on it ever since. So, of course, journalistically, we're going to bring that to you. But we also, at times like this, when there is a great risk to the freedoms of Canadians, we take action. So we actually have a petition that I strongly encourage you to sign and share. It's at a website called endlandgrabs.com. And in there, I go through some of the 3 factors that I think have influenced where we are at now. One is, of course, land acknowledgements, as we've discussed. The other is a UN aspirational framework. It's called the United Nations Declaration on Rights for Indigenous Peoples, not all people. And British Columbia was the first jurisdiction in the entire world to adopt that aspirational framework and commit to conforming all of our laws to it. Wow. That put 5% over and above 95%. So that needs to be addressed. And of course, we need to call on our legislatures, our city officials, all of them, to bring forth security for property rights. We thought we had that. We're learning we don't. That needs to change. So again, that is at endlandgrabs.com.
Great. Well, I'm so glad to see you on this. There's so much news out of British Columbia. Boy, you're covering it, whether it's sort of dissident news with the ostrich farm or serious constitutional challenges to property rights in Vancouver. You're there. It's great to see, Drea. Keep up the good work.